The Russia-Ukraine crisis is the result of a long, tangled history, a complex web of political, cultural, and strategic factors that have been brewing for decades. To truly understand the present conflict, we need to delve into the past and examine the key events that have shaped the relationship between these two nations. In 2014, Ukraine's pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych, was ousted after mass protests erupted in Kiev's Maidan Square. These protests, known as the Euromaidan Revolution, were sparked by his decision to reject a trade agreement with the European Union in favor of closer ties with Russia. Russia responded swiftly and decisively by annexing Crimea, a peninsula with a majority Russian population, in March 2014. This act, widely condemned by the international community as a violation of international law, marked a significant escalation in the conflict. Following the annexation of Crimea, conflict erupted in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region, a heavily industrialized area with a significant Russian-speaking population. This conflict pitted Russian-backed separatists against Ukrainian forces, resulting in a protracted and bloody war that simmered for years, claiming thousands of lives and displacing millions. Despite numerous ceasefire agreements, the fighting continued sporadically along the line of contact. Then, in February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine from multiple directions, shattering the fragile peace and plunging the region into a new and even more dangerous phase of the conflict. The initial aim of the invasion appeared to be the rapid seizure of Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, and the installation of a pro-Russian government. However, Ukrainian resistance proved to be far fiercer and more determined than many anticipated, and the Russian advance on Kyiv stalled and ultimately failed. Following the setbacks around Kyiv, the focus of the war shifted to the east and south of Ukraine, where Russia sought to consolidate its control over the Donbas region and establish a land bridge to Crimea. The invasion triggered a wave of massive international sanctions against Russia, targeting its economy, financial institutions, and key individuals. At the same time, Western countries began providing Ukraine with substantial military aid, including weapons, equipment, and training, to help it defend itself against the Russian aggression. From 2023 to 2025, the conflict evolved into a grinding war of attrition, characterized by heavily fortified front lines, intense artillery bombardments, and slow incremental gains and losses of territory. The war has resulted in heavy casualties on both sides, with devastating consequences for the civilian population, who have endured widespread destruction, displacement, and loss of life. Despite numerous attempts, diplomacy has repeatedly failed to achieve a lasting ceasefire or a comprehensive resolution to the conflict. Each escalation in the conflict has had profound geopolitical consequences, reshaping the security landscape of Europe and the world, and leading to a renewed focus on defense spending and military alliances. The war has created a massive humanitarian crisis, with millions of Ukrainians displaced from their homes, seeking refuge in neighboring countries, and beyond. The war's roots run deep, tracing back to centuries of complex and often fraught historical relations between Ukraine and Russia. But its impact is immediate and far-reaching, affecting not only the security of the region but also global economies, energy markets, and the daily lives of people around the world. Therefore, understanding these key moments and their context is absolutely essential to grasping the complexities of the crisis we face today. The world now faces the prospect of a prolonged and destabilizing conflict at the very heart of Europe, with uncertain consequences for the future of international relations. The story of the Russia-Ukraine war is still being written, and its ultimate outcome remains to be seen. The Russia-Ukraine conflict isn't a recent development. Its origins are deeply embedded in centuries of shared history. However, this history is also marked by contention and differing interpretations. Understanding these historical roots is crucial to grasping the complexities of the present-day conflict. For a significant period, Ukraine was under Russian and later Soviet rule, its fate intertwined with that of its larger neighbor. This period saw significant cultural and political influence exerted by Moscow. During this time, Moscow often denied Ukraine's distinct identity, suppressing its language, culture, and historical narratives in an attempt to assimilate it into a broader Russian identity. This suppression fueled resentment and a desire for self-determination among Ukrainians. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked a turning point. Ukraine seized this opportunity and declared its independence, embarking on a journey to forge its own path, free from external control. This declaration was met with jubilation by many Ukrainians who had long yearned for sovereignty. This move, however, immediately sparked tension with Russia. Russia, viewing Ukraine as vital to its own security and sphere of influence, struggled to accept the loss of its former territory and the potential shift in the regional balance of power. At the core of the conflict lies Ukraine's fundamental right to choose its own future and determine its own destiny. This includes its desire to align with the West, a move that Russia perceives as a direct threat to its own interests and security. Furthermore, internal divisions within Ukraine itself, particularly the linguistic and cultural differences between the Russian-speaking East and the Ukrainian-speaking West, have been consistently exploited by Moscow to sow instability and undermine Ukrainian unity. Russia often claims its actions are aimed at protecting the rights and interests of Russian speakers within Ukraine. However, Ukrainians view this as a pretext for interference in their internal affairs and a violation of their sovereignty. Ultimately, the conflict represents a fundamental clash of visions. Ukraine's unwavering pursuit of its own sovereignty and independent future, set against Russia's deep-seated desire to maintain control and influence over its neighbor. The fundamental disagreement over national identity, security concerns, and the complex web of international alliances makes finding a peaceful resolution incredibly elusive. These deep-seated historical roots and conflicting aspirations continue to fuel the devastating ongoing war in Ukraine. The situation in Ukraine took a dramatic turn in 2014 with the eruption of the Maidan Revolution. This pivotal moment marked a significant shift in the country's trajectory, as widespread protests challenged the existing political order. The revolution culminated in the ousting of Ukraine's pro-Russian president Viktor Yanukovych. His departure created a power vacuum and further polarized the nation, setting the stage for subsequent events. Capitalizing on the instability, Russia swiftly annexed Crimea, a peninsula with a majority Russian population and strategic importance in the Black Sea region. This annexation was executed using unmarked troops, often referred to as Little Green Men, whose presence and affiliation were initially denied by the Russian government. The annexation was then legitimized by a disputed referendum, the results of which were widely rejected by the international community due to concerns about its legitimacy and fairness. The world, led by many Western nations, condemned the move as illegal, a violation of international law, and a breach of Ukraine's sovereignty. However, the condemnation did little to reverse the situation on the ground. Simultaneously, in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region, a volatile situation was brewing. This industrial heartland, with a significant Russian-speaking population, became the epicenter of a new conflict. Fueled by pro-Russian sentiment and allegedly supported by Moscow, Russian-backed separatists declared breakaway republics in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, challenging the authority of the Ukrainian government. These separatists then engaged in armed conflict with Ukrainian forces, leading to a protracted and bloody war that devastated the region. Despite mounting evidence to the contrary, Moscow consistently denied direct involvement in the Donbas conflict, maintaining that the Russian fighters present were merely volunteers. However, evidence increasingly showed Russian support, including the presence of Russian troops, the supply of sophisticated weapons, and substantial financial support to the separatist movements. The Donbas War dragged on for 8 long years, becoming a frozen conflict with periods of intense fighting interspersed with fragile ceasefires. This prolonged conflict resulted in a devastating loss of life, killing over 14,000 people and displacing millions from their homes. The simmering tensions and unresolved issues of the Donbas War ultimately served as a prelude to the full-scale Russian invasion in 2022. Ceasefires, such as those brokered under the Minsk agreements, repeatedly failed to bring a lasting end to the violence, as violations and breaches of the agreements became commonplace. For Ukraine, the conflict was fundamentally a fight for its sovereignty and territorial integrity, a struggle to defend its borders against external aggression and internal separatism. For Russia, the conflict represented a way to exert influence over its neighbor, to keep Ukraine unstable and prevent its alignment with the West. This was a strategic move to keep Ukraine out of the West's orbit, preventing its potential membership in NATO and the European Union. The annexation of Crimea and the war in Donbas were not isolated incidents, but rather the opening acts of a much larger tragedy that would engulf the entire nation. These events, unfolding over years, set the stage and created the conditions for the full-scale war that would erupt in 2022, changing the geopolitical landscape of Europe. The initial international response, characterized by limited sanctions and diplomatic efforts, proved insufficient to deter further aggression. This perceived lack of a strong response may have emboldened further aggression, contributing to the escalation of the conflict. The seeds of today's devastating conflict, with its global ramifications, were sown in these early battles and political maneuvers that reshaped the map of Ukraine. The consequences of these events continue to shape the ongoing war and its far-reaching impact on the world stage. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a massive invasion of Ukraine. Russian forces attacked from the northeast and south, aiming to topple Kiev's government. Ukraine's resistance was unexpectedly strong, halting the Russian advance on the capital. The failed assault on Kyiv marked a turning point, exposing flaws in Russia's strategy. Russia shifted focus to the east and south, leading to brutal battles for cities like Mariupol. The war became a grinding struggle with heavy losses and little territory changing hands. Western weapons and aid helped Ukraine launch counteroffensives, but Russia dug in with fortified lines. The conflict evolved into a war of endurance, with both sides refusing to back down. The human cost has been staggering. The 2022 invasion triggered a swift global response. The U.S., EU, and allies imposed sweeping sanctions targeting Russia's economy and isolating it diplomatically. The UN condemned Russia, but Security Council action was blocked by Moscow's veto. Western nations sent billions in military aid and humanitarian aid, enabling Ukraine to resist. The support was crucial but carefully calibrated to avoid direct NATO-Russia conflict. Not all countries joined in. China, India, and others remain neutral, highlighting global divisions. China provided Russia with economic and diplomatic backing, criticizing NATO expansion. The world's response has been powerful, but not universal, creating a more fragmented global order. The conflict's ripple effects are felt worldwide. The war's true cost is measured in human suffering. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians have been killed or wounded. Cities like Bakhmut and Avdiivka have been devastated. Russian strikes have hit homes, hospitals, and schools, causing immense civilian casualties. Millions have fled their homes, creating Europe's largest refugee crisis since World War II. Neighboring countries have welcomed refugees, but the strain is immense. Inside Ukraine, daily life is marked by trauma, power outages, and disrupted services. Despite the hardship, Ukrainians have shown remarkable resilience and unity. The war has shattered lives, but not the spirit of the people. The human tragedy remains at the heart of this conflict. The war's economic shockwaves have reached every continent. Sanctions and reduced Russian energy exports sent oil and gas prices soaring, fueling global inflation. Food security suffered as Ukraine's grain exports were blocked, hitting vulnerable countries hardest. The conflict disrupted supply chains and forced nations to rethink trade and energy policies. Many countries increased defense spending and accelerated the shift to renewables. The cost of supporting Ukraine and managing fallout has strained national budgets. The war has reshaped the global economy, deepening divisions and uncertainty. Its impact will be felt for years to come. By summer 2025, the war has settled into a bloody stalemate. Fortified front lines stretch across Ukraine, with both sides locked in attritional warfare. Ukraine relies on Western weapons and strategic strikes. Russia bets on outlasting its opponents. Progress is slow and costly, measured in meters, not miles. Western support for Ukraine remains strong but faces political challenges. Russia pours resources into its war effort, hoping to exhaust Ukraine and its allies. The conflict tests not just armies but the endurance of nations. The world watches, waiting for a breakthrough. The path to peace remains blocked by irreconcilable demands. Ukraine insists on full withdrawal of Russian troops and justice for war crimes. Russia refuses to give up annexed territories or accept Ukraine in NATO. Diplomatic efforts continue, but both sides believe they can still win on the battlefield. International mediators keep channels open, searching for compromise. Any lasting peace will require new security guarantees and a stable European order. The war could freeze, erupt again, or shift with political change. The world hopes for a just peace, but the journey is long. Ukraine's resilience inspires, but the outcome is uncertain. The search for peace is a test of global resolve and the value of sovereignty.
Thunder rolls like a rebel's laugh. Lightning cracks, the sky's torn in half. Hit the ground, boom, boom, can't stop.